Onto the boiler and chiller systems, I thought it would be helpful just to go over with a larger group what has been said at the vestry and other places, just to sort of keep you guys up to date on things. You may know that St. John's has at current in its old building, not this, but basically anything beyond the kitchen that way, is controlled by a boiler and a chiller. And the boiler and the chiller, depending on the temperature outside, either makes it hot or cold air blow out of the vents. It has nothing to do with the temperature inside, sadly. It has only to do with the temperature outside. And so the heat or the cold pumps into these fan coil units that you see around, and that's what makes heat or cold. That's where the boiler and the chiller room are located. If you're unaware of that, this is sort of what they look like. You may have seen some of this. I put some of this in a video before. That's the chiller system. This is part of the boiler system. Do I still have my, I do. These are fan coil units. These are pump motors. Those, when I started here, cost about $700. They're now about $7,000 because you can't find them. They do not exist. And so you can't really refurbish them well either. So we're just praying they don't go down. And I said, when we strip this system out of here, I'm keeping them. And I'm going to sell them. Because there's some old school out there in Podunk nowhere who needs them some pump motors. But actually, that has been talked about, right? Because there are some components that apparently are quite rare. So we'll see how that goes. I just put where these sort of fan coil units are in the building. You can see them up here on the ceiling, on the walls. This is down in 125 and whatnot. This is more of the chiller room. You can see it's leaking down there. You can see it's leaking in the hallways in various places. We don't need to see that. This is the big problem, are the pipes are really corroded that control that system. You can see more of that here. Here's a better view. Terrifying. So the part of the problem is you cannot find the motors, you cannot find the components, and to repair the system would be to basically tear it all out and put it all back in again, especially all the infrastructure of the pipes and whatnot. So more fun pictures. How do you get to the end of this? Yeah. Are they safe? So I want to move on in my presentation. I don't know. They're creating heat and cold. We don't anticipate them to break, although they do leak. If they broke suddenly, that could be a problem. Hopefully nobody's standing under a pipe if it were to break suddenly, but I don't think that would. I think it would just leak dramatically. So I think they're relatively safe, as opposed to causing a loss of human life. Yes, I think they're safe. But what they don't do is meet current code requirements for air purification standards and outside air being brought into the church and those sorts of things. So safe is a relative term. Yeah. I wanted to point out these are fan coil motors. You may know if you walk around, many of these fan coil units don't work, and that's because we've been stealing the pump motors out of them to make other units work. So I have two in my office. One had the motor stolen out of it to go down to the preschool and whatnot. So that's just how it works. These are units on the roof. These are the things that make cold for the chiller at the moment. I'm going to keep going on here. So let's talk about replacement. First, I got to stop on my cool slide, though. That's anyway, I worked hard on that graphic. Very nice. So what we're talking about when we're talking about replacement is the old building. So this is the first floor of the older building. This is the second floor of the older building. And so what we're proposing, and actually David Dwyer and John Horn and others engaged a group called Schultz Engineering. That's their little logo there. And asked, what do we do? We actually asked. It really started with us asking our HVAC contractor, what do we do when we can't, because they're telling us they can't fix these things. And they're like, well, you're going to need an engineer, right? Because, you're well beyond, you're talking about a whole system replacement, and that requires bringing things up to code. It requires proper load and all of this stuff that mechanical engineers know. And so we engaged the Schultz group, and their proposal was a mixed system, both of what's called variable refrigerant direct outside air, and HVAC. So get ready. You're about to know about all the kinds of fun stuff. So variable refrigerant looks like this. It's a unit that sits outside, and then it has these various heads on it. So you can have things like this. That could be one if it was. It's not, but they would look like that. And it blows out hot or cold air, and that's mixed with outside air that comes in from another system, so that you have the proper outside air that's filtered coming in. So that has to do with health standards of the room. We currently don't have any of that right now. Our boiler and chiller systems just make hot or cold. They don't bring in any outside air, and they don't filter air in any way. So that's all about this. You may remember hearing about this back in COVID with all of the virus and particles and air filtration systems being important. So bringing that up to code would be helpful for us. This is another example of a VRF system. Those are controlled in such a way that every room will have a thermostat, which is really nice. But they'll also be programmed by a central controller, which can turn things off in an unoccupied setting and turn them back on. So that will save electricity, and their efficiency will be far greater, and the temperature will be better. I was just talking to somebody this morning who said, yeah, I was in the Navy and the heat was on. And I'm like, yeah, that's controlled by the outside. And so when it's hot in the Navy, because it's Christmas Eve and there's 400 people in there, and it's cold outside, well, heat's coming out. Who cares if it's hot in the Navy? It's cold outside. Turn the heat on. So that's how it works. You can't really control that very well. But this new system will enable us to do that. There's an example of a VRF unit. There's a VRF unit that's actually in the church. As you leave through the preschool area, you can see the thermostat, and you can see the VRF unit. We have one that's a ceiling unit in the church. These are kind of what they look like when you get on a roof. Here's another example of, here's a better one. Here's a good example of how that works, kind of drawn out. You can see the the DOWA system is this thing that looks, basically it's the size of a dryer vent as opposed to a big vent. So just bringing in what you need for outside air. Let's see. So we're proposing in this system that these units will go on the roof in these locations, and that will provide through ductwork things to the church. So here they are outside on the ground floor. Pretty crazy, huh? And then as you go on, you can sort of see where the new ductwork systems will be placed throughout the church, down these hallways, through the system, through the rooms and whatnot. There they are on the second floor into the office section. Here's the nave. You can see there are vents cut around the altar area and the choir area in various places. This is a big one with all this plumbing, all this various ductwork that has to go into the ceiling. So the entire ceiling below the nave has to come out to put all this ductwork in that carries all this stuff through. So the nave in Tilson Hall, it turns out, will get big HVAC units, kind of like this room has. And then the rest of the church will get the VRF and DOWA systems. So that's a big impact to the church. Now, the good news is, you're tearing out the ceiling under the nave. Well, shed me a tear. It's not the most attractive ceiling on earth. So it's okay. There's nothing beautiful and attractive that we're losing in the result of this, I would say. So that's good. It's areas that we really haven't touched in any kind of a renovation. So that's helpful. But obviously the impact of this is quite serious. You can see these are what these units actually look like and where they'll be located on the roof. So the nave gets forced air, Tilson gets forced air just like this room. The other places get the VRF kind of units, but obviously this stuff has to be highly engineered. So the nave, the Tilson Hall, it turns out, is not going to be impacted very much, if at all. Its current vents that are kind of on the walls, those can stay, and its current air return system can stay as well. So in terms of Tilson Hall, the only thing that you'll notice different is you're not going to have that really dramatic hum noise in there, and we're all going to miss that. So Tilson will actually improve, which will be great. The nave, on the other hand, is more complicated. So when the nave gets impacted, you may notice as you sit in the pews that there are air returns underneath these pews. You've seen that. Maybe you've dropped something down them. It's very exciting. I've been told a wedding ring or two, or certainly a piece of communion host has gone down the ones that are right here at the altar rail. That's always fun. So the air returns in the nave will need to change, and they'll be located right back here. I think one is right there on that wall, and one is right here on this wall. So you won't really notice them. They'll be in the back of the room. And then the current venting on the sides will basically stay the same. It may get raised up a little bit. I think there was some debate about replacing that venting on the sides. And then proper heating and air would be installed to the choir loft and to the chancel area. So those, this is going to be emotional. The faux brick things on the wall, those have to go away. I know. They're so lovely. But you know what I'm talking about, the ones next to the altar that are painted like brick. It was a cool idea, at the time. So that will get replaced. We'll have proper venting in those areas. And so some of the thought has been, well, if you're going to wind up, abandoning some of these structures in the nave under the pews and whatnot, then if we could raise the money, then we would have the capacity then to do some renovations in the nave as well. So that, and when we come asking for money, we're not just asking for improvements to the nave. Not just asking for HVAC and heat and air, but we may ask for some cosmetic things in the nave, because I don't know about you, but it's nice to give to something that's pretty as well as something that's practical. So one of the thoughts is to redo the floor in the nave in some capacity. And what you're looking at here is this sort of light green asbestos flooring. So that would be removed. Apparently it's not as big a deal to remediate that as it is other types of asbestos, but you don't have to do the tinting and things like you have with other products. But you do have to do some, but it's not as dramatic, which is helpful. And then we would, in order to do that, you have to pull the pews out. Well, if you're going to pull the pews out, you might as well have them refinished. So we've got estimates on having that done. And then there's a chimney in the nave. Did you all know there's a chimney in the nave? It's right, I don't know if I can zoom in on that, but it's right there. Do you remember St. Squirmy? That's a chimney, and that's a chimney from the boiler system that allows fresh air in and venting out. And it will go away because it doesn't need to exist anymore, because the boiler will go away. So that will get taken out, and so we'll have that space opened up again, which will be interesting. Well, it's never been open, so it'll be opened up. So that will be interesting. It'll be nice to have proper heating and air in the choir loft, because we won't necessarily need the humidifier controls for the organ. It'll all be in one system, which will be helpful in terms of the cost effectiveness. But in addition to looking at all of these things, the property committee has also identified several other things that need to happen. And that would be pitched roofs, parking lot, fogged windows, the warped flooring on the second floor, some kitchen equipment, the concrete caps that are around the top of the brick walls. We wanted to enhance some security for the preschool. Elevator maintenance will be coming due, and then we have some exterior lighting on there. So all in total, we're looking at over $4 million. Now, the good news is this doesn't all have to happen tomorrow. I was telling somebody, even if you had all the money in the world, you wouldn't replace a roof that's not damaged yet. But we know that in the next 10 years, we're going to need to do elevator maintenance. We're going to need to do some pitched roofs. And you can just walk around outside and look at the pitched roofs, and you'll see, I can see they've been patched here or there. So over time, over the next 10 years, we're looking at somewhere between $4 and $5 million in terms of infrastructural and cosmetic, changes to the church that need to happen. So, yay. A few of us, Bill, our treasurer, and Merrill, who's head of the finance committee, and Dan Robertson, who's been a help to us from a campaign committee point that we've sort of put together to ask what can we do here. We all went down to the bank to ask them, what do we do? And it's complicated. Obviously, they just said it's free. No, it's complicated. So the hope is that we'll be able to start a campaign somewhere by the annual meeting at the end of January. We'll be able to certainly have more information, probably starting a campaign sometime in February, and then pushing forward. The thought, though, is that we'd like to say, well, it's really a three-phase campaign over 10 years. The first part of the campaign would be $2.5 million for the boiler and chiller and the nave refurbishments. And then from there, subsequent campaigns, probably the second campaign is going to be paying off some of the first campaign and doing pitched roofs. And then by the time we get to the third campaign, you'll have elevators that are now in need of repair and whatnot. So over time, those maintenance needs will, in some areas, will grow, and some areas will get them resolved. But it's going to be long and complicated, and require us all to pitch in and give so that we can continue to have heating and air and these things that are critical to the operation of the plant that is St. John's, the building. Any questions about any of this stuff? Yeah, Nancy. Correct. Yeah, now we're going to have new controls that will control everything. It'll tie in the new and the old. Right now, those controls are dicey. If you worked here, you would know that they were a nightmare. Maybe you do. You're around enough to know that sometimes it's off or on. But it'll all be tied in together. But that's correct. The stuff that's on the roof of this building, it's all fine, more or less. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, a great question. She's asking how long it would take to do this replacement. So if we end the campaign by early June of 2024, and then order the parts, we could take anywhere from right away from some of them to 6 months or more for others. And by then, who knows how long it will take, depending on what happens in the world. But it could be by the summer of 2024-ish, or maybe even the fall of 2024. So it's quite a ways out. It's probably slightly less than a year. What's interesting is they can install those VRF units while we have the boiler and chiller in place, providing it still works. So that wouldn't cause too much disruption. So the offices, I'll just one day turn off my boiler and turn on my VRF unit. And then eventually they'll come pull those fan coil units out of the offices, but they could just sit there forever if we wanted them to. So, and then the Tilson Hall, one day, they'll literally rip off the ductwork for the boiler and chiller and plug in the ductwork for the new HVAC unit, and so Tilson will be not a problem. The nave, however, why is it always the nave, right? It is more complicated because, as I said, they've got to then cut holes in the back of the wall. They've got to put venting in. They've got to run stuff, and so that will be far more complicated. So the area under the nave will be down for a while. And then if we do the renovation to the nave, I would say you're looking at probably a little over a month, maybe 2 months, that it would be down. So we would just worship in this space, and it would be fun. And we'll go out on the lawn again. No, hopefully we'll avoid that. But, yeah. Yeah, so we're applying for a loan to see what we can get, and that's happening as we speak. So by the annual meeting, I'll have more information about what that looked like and what the exact terms are, what that could be. But the bank, one of the things that they look at, eventually, we'll have to we get it's like when you go to buy a house, you get pre-approved, kind of. But they really need to know how much we can raise in the campaign, right? And so that's a big part of the formula, and we don't know that because we haven't started the campaign yet. So the real number would come post a campaign in late May, early June. Yeah. I know, nothing's easy. Yeah. Yeah.
Are these values based upon doing the work within 6 months or a year, or are they escalated over time?
I would imagine that they'll be more expensive the longer we wait. So we'd have to rebid. Yeah. I think they'll be pretty close, but we've padded them a little bit too. But because so they really originally said that the boiler and chiller replacement and all of that was going to be $1.7 million. But that didn't include, you tore out a ceiling, so now you got to put a ceiling back in. Right, so there's all this stuff to repair the things that they've done. So this is why we're getting it well. And then, of course, there's the what you find. And if y'all have ever poked around in this church, you're going to know that you're going to find something for sure, because it's just anything built in the 50s and so on. You wind up uncovering secrets. But we're pretty sure we know what's there. And we've had things tested for asbestos. It turns out the pipes that are wrapped for the boiler and chiller are not asbestos. I know. I mean, that we dodged that bullet. That would have been huge. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll be pretty close on some of those costs. Yeah, Kathy. There are many things. That means it'll never happen that way. I know. I just really will try hard to dodge Christmas and Easter. That would be the goal. But I can't promise anything. I mean, and when you're on the schedule of a contractor, if you've ever had anything done at your house, you know, you just do it whenever they're ready, because otherwise it'll never get done. So, I don't know. Yeah. Yes. Yes. In fact, right now as we speak, do you all know where George Mertz keeps his cones? You know, if you've been on you know what I'm talking about. It's in the breezeway, and there's that little door behind the sort of entrance to the nave from the breezeway. And there's a big fan coil unit in there that is heated, and air is brought to that unit by the boiler and chiller. And that fan coil unit has one of those $7,000 pump motors, but it also has other damage to it as well. Well, that unit just provides heat and air to the choir room and the ladies' restroom. In order to make it work, it leaks. In order to repair it, it's like, what was it, Elizabeth, $17,000? $15,000 to repair it. So we said, forget it. We're not going to repair it, because why put $15,000 into something you're going to tear out? So we have to turn it on, let it leak into a bucket, and then when we're done with choir practice, turn it off and go dump the bucket outside. So that's where we are at this point. And that's not the only one that's like that. There are several things that are like that, where we borrowed from this unit and plugged in this unit. Many of the units don't work. So it is failing slowly, but a catastrophic failure would be a pipe burst. And if that were to happen, then that would be an insurance claim. Where's Skip? Hope he's not here. If that were to happen, that would be a problem. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we could turn some of it off or bypass certain things, but I don't know. That would be a problem, because then you get a lot of fluid flowing out into the wherever it's leaking. So if that were to happen, then yes, we would have to, what would happen to the church? Well, we would have to provide some sort of auxiliary heat or air. So heat is easier to produce. So now that we're in the heat season, I'm feeling a little easier, because I can go get a heater and put it somewhere. If it's air conditioning and we're in the summer, that's more difficult, but you can also get portable air conditioners that are large. I mean, maybe you've seen them in restaurants and other places where the air has gone out and it's noisy and it sits over there and pushes air out, so we could get some of those kind of units. That's not ideal, but